would you like to just jump straight in, or is there anything you'd like to ask me before we get going?
Yeah, which car is ready to go? Because I have my suit on, as you can
Yeah,
see. Notice this? I could
that's
not.
fantastic. Look at that.
I could only button up to my waist, and from there on, it was. Uh, I tried to go on a diet since last night, but to no avail. So I figure at least I'm halfway there. Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see it. It's fantastic. Well, we've got some of your clothing downstairs. Your helmet. I just walked past it just a minute ago. Obviously, as you can see, there's memorabilia around everywhere here.
Yeah.
Actually, probably the best thing for me to start with would be to say that then I might apologize. There might be some background noise going on because the workshops downstairs are still working.
Well,
Because I've come and sat over at Classic today to talk to you, obviously, so we can talk about the cars that are all around us. Your winning cars are surrounding me here, and we've got more sat over to the side there. Um,
um,
but so sorry if there's any background noise. But for anyone who's watching this who perhaps isn't as familiar with Classic Team Lotus and what they do, the team here, we're very lucky in having, I suppose, essentially the only works heritage race team that keeps these old race cars running, enjoyed, and seen. So it's wonderful for me to be talking to you from here today. Um,
yes.
if it's all right with you, what I'd really like to do is, I mean, I know you're one of the most successful race drivers in history. Four-time IndyCar champion, Formula One champion, Daytona 1967, Indy 1969, which hopefully we'll come on to. But I'd really like to just focus on your time with Lotus, if that's all right, and maybe talk about the
Absolutely.
cars that we've got all around.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
Brilliant.
yeah.
Okay, great. Well, jumping straight into it then. Well, first of all, I should say that I said that I'm a big Lotus fan and enthusiast. So part of my day job when I'm at work is showing people all around the collection we've got here, talking to them about Lotus history and talking to them about your cars. So you can imagine how excited I am to talk to the person who actually drove these cars in the day when they were winning races and winning championships. So as a first off, actually, how does it feel to see them? Does it bring back memories straight away to see these cars?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, precious memories for that. For that matter, of course, I see the 79 there, and of course, the 77
Yeah.
that's on your shoulder, which gave us a win on the last race of the season. And I always had certain pride about that because a lot of people say, oh, well, it was raining, could be, you know what, we were on pole in the dry. So, we had a complete weekend. And so that was the beginning of a wonderful relationship, with Lotus. But actually, that was not the beginning of the ongoing relationship. At one point, I want to go back and tell you just how I first met Colin Chapman and then also Jimmy. Tell me when you want to go with that one.
Well, funny you say because I've got your book here, which is my copy,
There
and I picked this bit specifically because of what you've just said, where Colin Chapman writes the foreword, which is great, and he says that the first meeting with Mario Andretti, late 1964, Jimmy Clark and I testing the 1965 Indianapolis car, and it says the following year we won, obviously Lotus 1965 Indianapolis win, and Mario in his first race there finished third. I remember that Jimmy was very impressed with his ability, which had to mean something. Obviously, Jim Clark at this time, becoming the world's most successful Formula One driver, and so too was I. So that's what Colin said. I'd love to hear from you about the first introduction with Colin Chapman.
Well, all of that, of course, but as 1965 rolled around, of course, the Indy is one race ever on the planet where you get to spend so much time there because of those days there were 2 weeks of practice before qualifying and so on and so forth. So great opportunity for me to befriend Colin for a long, for that period of time, and also I want to show you a photo with.
Oh, look at that.
Jimmy, yeah, and I in the pits at Indianapolis during practice, just exchanging notes and so on and so forth. So, and I took every opportunity to do that, to get to know both and Colin, of course. And the best part is that of course, the race is over. Jimmy wins, and I'm recognized, not only for third place, but Rookie of the Year, and he was Rookie of the year before. So, there were other events that we shared together. Anyway, we were saying our goodbyes after the banquet on Monday evening. I said, Colin, someday I would like to do Formula One. And he looked at me in the eyes and said, Mario, when you think you're ready, you call me and I will have a car for you. Now, can you imagine how I felt at that moment? I felt like I conquered the world. And that gave me every reason, to just really work toward refining and learning the art of road racing and all that sort of thing. I lobbied like crazy with USAC, to introduce road racing because they were trying to obviously, just expand, their audience. And so there was one road race in 1965, my first full season, and I won it, so that was another thing that, so we're going in the right direction. And of course, there was an opportunity for me to join the Ford Le Mans program, which there was a lot of development, a lot of testing, and there it was, so an opportunity again to do much more road racing. And the best part about that is that Bruce McLaren was one of the chief drivers of that program, and he and I really, really came together, and we used to spend hours and hours, I'd like going to dinner at night and so on and so forth, and discuss a lot of things. And I remember that, he was a very technical driver. I had the high speed pretty well handled, but, I had to watch, just what he would do at hairpins and so forth, the way he would rotate the car and all that. And so all of these things were in place for me to feel at one point that I could call Colin and say, Colin, I think I'm ready to try it. And of course, that was 3 years later. Yeah. After we had won with Bruce, the 12-hour Sebring. I had done some, I had won about 3 or 4 road races with Dan Gurney finished second to me, in USAC. So I felt it was time to call Colin, and sure enough, he said the objective was, if I'm too long, just stop me. But
oh no, please carry on.
Because the objective there was for me to do the last 2 races of the season, but I was vying for the championship in USAC, and I was leading the championship points very narrowly because I didn't gain any points at Indy in 1968. So I said that we will do Monza and Watkins Glen, the last 2 races. And he said, right. He said, we will test in Monza. He said the week before. So obviously you get familiar with the car. And so here we are, Monza. And when I first had the first taste of a Formula One car was, the 49, and I thought I just died and went to heaven. It was just the feel, the agility of that car versus what I had experienced, before on the road course and so forth. I said, this is it. This is my baby. And but there was a glitch here. For Monza, I had to come back on a Saturday on a Friday, because I had a Saturday race on a dirt track in Indianapolis, which counted for the national championship. So the deal was that I could only qualify, because in those days, every lap that you turn during practice was a qualifying lap. If you remember, the 4 sessions of practice, everything counted for qualifying. And I had to do it the first session on a Friday, and then get on a plane, come to the States, race there, and come back to Monza to race Sunday. And that was the problem. Now, they all the rules, the 24-hour rules were technically waived because, you know, I knew that I was up against that, but the FIA but when we arrived, I say we because, by the way, getting ahead of myself, I talked Bobby Unser into coming with me, and he drove. I talked to Louis Stanley, and he drove a BRM. So in the first session, we could do some slipstreaming, you know, to get the best time because you know, it was very important to do that. And I know that I couldn't get my teammates to help me very much, maybe. So anyway, at that point, I was like over a second quicker than anyone, you know, but nobody's trying the first practice. I think 1.7 seconds. And I remember that. But anyway, fast forward, go to the States, I finished second to AJ Foyt, you know, at the Hoosier 100. And we're back in Monza about 10:30 or so in the morning. We missed the morning practice, the warm up, but all of a sudden, I understand there was a protest. There was a protest by, I think I knew it was Ferrari protest because during the test, I was quicker than Chris Amon that was there a week before.
Right.
With the Lotus. And but anyway, my car was on the grid. I was, at that point, I was 7th on the grid, but they did not let us start. And I know during the protest, I offered to be down there because Colin was there and everybody was speaking Italian. And I'm the only one that obviously couldn't intervene. But because even Count Lurani, who was the FIA arm in Italy, he had agreed, Bacigalupi, the organizer, they all knew that that rule was waived, but Ferrari protested and it was withheld, and so I didn't start. So fast forward, my first actual race was Watkins Glen, and I had never raced there. I had never, you know, it was the first time that weekend that I had seen the place. And Lord and behold, you know, everything felt good, and we put the car on pole there. And who was next to me? Jackie Stewart, you know, world champion. So, oh my goodness, you know, there was something I was probably as surprised as anyone else, but very happy. So as you can see, that was the beginning of our relationship. And then from there, you know, many other things happened in between. But I just had to tell you just how it all started. And Colin was the man that was responsible for giving me the opportunity to achieve my most ambitious dream that started when I was a young teenager.
Well, I mean, thank you so much for giving me so much information. It's fantastic. And I think we're just going to go way off script here. And I'm just so excited to hear what you're telling me. So I was going to start with saying about the 49 and, you know, 10 years before actually winning the championship, the first race, the shocking the Formula One world by getting pole first time, like you've just said. You was just saying about talking to Colin Chapman and being drawn into it by Colin Chapman. Is that what really drew you into Lotus? Was it Lotus at Indianapolis and seeing the difference and the performance? Is that what really got you interested in approaching Colin Chapman to drive for him?
Well, it was a wonderful opportunity, number one. I mean, you know, one of the very top teams in Formula One, which obviously, if you're going to delve into you know, another category, I always try to see whether I could go with you know, the best equipment, because I had experience less than that, and I know that you cannot perform miracles. You know, you need the equipment to be able to showcase whatever you can bring to the party. But yeah, this was a great opportunity. But my dream of Formula One began when I was a young teenager, still living in Italy, as you can imagine. You know, especially the early 50s. You know, we were married a long time. I mean, long story, but how we wound up after the war. But at the young age, my teenage years began, you know, I was still in a refugee camp in Italy from 1950, when Formula One became official. There were, you know, incredible protagonists, you know, with all the drivers and Ferrari, Maserati, Alfa Romeo. You know, first official world championship was Nino Farina with the Alfa Romeo, and then course, Alberto Ascari, and he became my absolute idol, and so forth. And so in 1954, I told this story many times, but my brother Aldo and I, obviously, we always expressed, our interest in Formula One. Some friends took us to Monza to see the Italian Grand Prix. And from there on, I always say the mold was cast. There was no plan B for my life, not knowing. I mean, there was talking about the impossible dream, but again, Formula One, my dream began then. And then coming to the States, here came the opportunity that I would not have had in any other way. If we would have stayed in Italy, there's no way that I would have had the opportunity to just start racing and all that. But here, all of a sudden, it presented itself because of the way motor racing was actually developed here and on the local level and on and on and on. And so, but the objective all along was Formula One.
Right. Okay.
Absolutely, it was. I'll give you another example. In 1963, 23 years old, I was driving midgets, and I was having some good success. It was during a holiday weekend here, they call it Labor Day, and there were two races that we were doing, one in Flemington, New Jersey, one in Hatfield, Pennsylvania, at night. And so I won everything, qualifying, heat race, and the feature in Flemington. And then we go to Hatfield, and I did the same thing there. Then there was a third feature to be run because of rain. There was a rain cancellation before, so they had to run a third feature. And just before I was getting pushed off, to start the car. You know what I was thinking about? I was thinking about Dan Gurney, who had just got a ride in Formula One with Ferrari. I was thinking of Formula One while I was getting pushed up on a third of a mile dirt track in a midget. And then later on that season, they had only one road race at Lime Rock in Connecticut with the midgets. And Mark Donahue was driving a rear engine midget, which was built especially for that race, rear engine midget. And on the last lap, I beat him and I won that race. And you talk about, what was I thinking about? Formula One. You see what I mean? Even before. But then, how do you earn your way there? And I thought, when you get into the top level, IndyCar and so on and so forth, obviously, you can have a very satisfying career right here, no question, without even having a passport. But my objective was always, to someday during my career, I have to give Formula One a try. So that was my objective, as you can see, from way, way back. It wasn't just born all out of the blue, by the time, and that's the reason why I was really, really eyeballing, Colin, by being there. One of the top constructors, and of course, Jimmy, that was an absolute, dream to be able to meet and even talk with him and so on and so forth. So.
Oh, amazing. So I've got to ask, well, since we mentioned Jim Clark, what was it like? What was he like as a person?
Oh, as a person, he was just kind, very calculated, and very approachable as well. That's one thing. Sometimes I feel, oh well, and I found that yes, quite the gentleman, of course. And I think he could see something in me that I had this passion, and appreciation for where he was and how I wish that I could have a taste of that. He knew that because I was all there, and I was thinking, oh my goodness, where are you going next? Can I go with you? So.
Yeah. So you talked a lot then about, Formula One, your dream way from a young age. Would you say that World Championship with Lotus in 1978 in that car, was that your proudest achievement in your race career?
Well, let me just give you why. Absolutely, because my very first race, the Formula One race that I saw in my life at age 14 was Monza. And guess where we clinched the world championship? And even winning Monza the year before, I won it even that year, because, we were, Jill Villeneuve and myself were, penalized, technically for jumping the start, which he did, but I didn't. But they had to penalize us as well, not only Ferrari. Anyway, but we were going to protest that. But after Ronnie's accident and so forth, we didn't have that in us to do that. So we just let it go. But to go back to the magnitude of that for me, to clinch the world championship right there in Monza, where my dream began, my real dream, impossible dream began in 1954 at age 14. Now, how do you put value to that? I mean, it can't get any better than that.
Yeah. Well, I say I'm wanting to jump ahead again here now and talk about this car, but maybe I'll go back a little bit to the start, because we're talking about the 49. And if I just do this, you've got a 49. This is a Graham Hill car, but just like the one that you drove at Watkins Glen.
Oh, wow. Oh, honestly.
Yeah, so we've got the high wing there, just like I suppose you would have raced with as well.
Yeah, yes, of course. Yeah.
Just like it was in its day. And you said about you fell in love with that car instantly. Actually, in your book, you say the same thing about just falling in love with it instantly. What was it about that car? What made that so different to what you were used to driving? And what do you think made that car so special?
Well, obviously, the Formula One cars, by the rules, it's built only for road racing. And the rules obviously allow it to be much lighter and all that. So the quality of that is the acceleration, the braking, the agility of the car. And that's one thing that I experiencing that after having experienced basically sports prototypes and the Indy cars, which actually are much heavier, bulkier because of the necessity of the rigidity of the shaft, everything else because of the loading on the ovals. So when you turn that into a road racing car, obviously it's quite a bit heavier, and even as a single seater, which is obviously that's the purest form of our sport, as we all know. Still, it doesn't come close to to the quality of road holding and everything else of the Formula One car. And for me, to having had that experience, especially at 49, which was extremely competitive, it was a car that could win any race in those days. I mean, how fortunate was I to have had that opportunity? And and as you say, just for me, having that first experience with that car, that gave me the confidence to say, you know what, I think maybe I can do this. Yeah. And the times were telling us that, what, we have a chance here. I had a lot to learn, of course, but still, I think, there were exciting times for me, no question.
Yeah. So talk about Team Lotus. So we talk about the 49 in a car with a huge amount of innovation to Formula One, the aerofoil wings for the first time, the Ford DFE Cosworth engine, most successful engine in Formula One history. Lots of other features on that car, which, like you said, gave it that competitive edge. And Lotus known for those innovations. When you started to drive for Lotus, so 1976 season, obviously Lotus had just come off its worst season in history at that time that it ever had. And obviously the 72, just like the 49 before it, arguably the most successful Formula One car of all time. But then in its sixth consecutive season, potentially losing some of its competitive edge after its 3 world champions that it won. So what was the driving factor still to joining Lotus, even at that point when they were not where they had been, let's say, when you were driving the 49?
Well, Scott, here's fate for me. And in 1975 and 76, I ventured, with the Val Pernelli Jones team into Formula One, which was basically the American team. And we robbed Maurice Philippe from Lotus to be the designer. And but basically he designed, to his credit, he had the basic design of the cars that won the championships in 72 and 73. And but anyway, just to go forward here, in 1976, at the beginning of the season, we're second race, we're at Long Beach, and I'm on the grid, and one of the broadcasters came to me, and Chris Economaki was very well known in America. He said, Mario, he says, what is your reaction when Val and Parnelli told us that this will be the last race that we'll enter in Formula One? I said, what? I couldn't believe it, because they never discussed that with me.
Right.
And so anyway, didn't finish the race. We had a pebble or rock, something going through a radio. Anyway, the next morning, I'm having breakfast at the Queensway Hilton, the hotel where we were staying. And my wife didn't even come down with me. I was there by myself. And a few tables away was Colin by himself. And looked like we both had our chin in our socks, for sure. I mean, we were just a big depression here, And so I'm looking at him, he's looking at me. And I said, Colin, may I join you? He said, yes, of course. So we started talking. And I said, Colin, it's a bad day for me. He said, oh, me too. I said, but it's different for me. I said, the team has withdrawn from Formula One. I said, well, it's the beginning of the season, and I want to continue. I said, oh, Mario says, I wish I had a decent car for you. He said that I probably experienced the worst weekend of my career. And he said, I wish I had a decent car for you. I said, Colin, if you'll have me, make me number one on the team, we'll make it. We'll make it better. And he said, are you sure? I said, 100%. And that's when the relationship started. And that's the beginning of what we cultivated after that. And as you can see, look at the record in 1976, we got better and better, and we wind up with an honest, good win. But we had podiums and so on and so forth. So we were coming on, and, here we go. So it all started. And at the end of the season, he said, Mario says, I don't know how we going to approach this, but the next year's car is going to make this one look like a London bus. I never forgot that comment. And we all sat down, Hethel and caucused, and everybody was throwing ideas on the table. And I gave him an example, which, it's rarely been talked about because I don't want to give me much credit, but I'm the one that suggested to put pods on the side because the experience that I had with the March 701, and when I drove that when I was driving for Andy Granatelli in 1970, and we tested South Africa. I thought that maybe the pods that it had, like wing shape pods on the side, which were just aesthetically, they had no other function. And I thought that maybe, altitude, I thought that maybe they created, some frontal area issue. So we took the pods off during the test, and all of a sudden I'm flying the front end. I lost front downforce, and we had to, turn up the front wings, by about 3 degrees to compensate for that. And I mentioned that, and I said at that meeting that we had, I said, why don't we just put much bigger shape pods from wheelbase to wheelbase? Because those on the March, if you look, they were very, very small, but still a wing shape, had downforce. and then with the fence, and that's what exactly what they did. But we had no idea what reaction we would have ultimately. And the thing that really brought it around about the ground effect was a test in Hockenheim. Testing in Hockenheim, and at the end of both straightaways, the Bosch curve that connected the two straightaways, long right-hander. In the middle of the right-hander, when the car, obviously, when you get a lot of lean on the left side, I was gaining tremendous amount of downforce. Why? Because I was closing the gap of the fence, to the ground. And I come in and I told Colin, I said, Colin, something is happening here that's really good. I said, but let's think about this. And so he sent one of the mechanics into town to get some plastic strips to close that gap on both sides. And I went out there again, like 2.5 seconds lap time for about 1 lap, 2 laps. And then once they wear out, then you start losing downforce. And so then that's when at one point that we put those bristles, like a broom type of thing, which closed the gap. At least they remained constant. It wasn't not as efficient. And after that, then Colin designed the movable skirts. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
There was one step after. Now we just kept finding things, on the Lotus that's right behind,
Or that.
right where it is.
There we go. And we've got those skirts down the bottom here, just running along. We're
That's
talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's a 78, which that's the first actually proper ground effect car. But it's amazing how things progress, how we were learning, and then they were learning more and more about how to derive the proper information on a wind tunnel. Colin Chapman was the first one that thought that they needed a moving belt because a constant tunnel, was giving them erroneous information because it was, they were doing some changes to the car, like on the exits and so on and so forth, but they were getting different information from the tunnel to what I was giving during the test. So not until they put that moving belt that all of a sudden, because of all the turbulence that the wheels were using, something that you could not duplicate in the wind tunnel because the wheels were not turning. You know what I mean? And so there are a lot of things. There were so many things that that Colin just obviously perfected and put some sense to it, and all of that. So it was interesting times. It was just like I keep saying, a dream come true for me, because I always loved that. I love these innovations, especially these were the times when the aerodynamic aspect of the racing car was really being explored in every possible way. You see what Colin did, with the high wing right on the uprights. I mean, the most efficient way to do it, because you could keep the car soft for the slow corners, because the downforce was right straight down, on the wheels, and but of course, that was ruled out, and you had to just move on. But then of course, then there was always a compromise, when a car gets so much downforce, you have to make it stiffer. So you lose traction in the slow corners. And how do you compromise that? There were so much work to do, so much to be found out. But I love that part of it because, again, all along in my career, I love to just see what we could do better, along. And Colin was a genius about that. There's something about the man, and he thrived on that sort of thing, to think outside the box, You always felt such confidence with him because all he wanted to do is give the driver the best advantage possible. You know what I mean? Okay, the driver but he wanted to give us the most advantage possible that we could have, like weight and so on and so forth. And that was a beautiful thing about him.
That's interesting. You said about this innovation and always wanting to give you the best tools for the job, as it were. So if we go back and we're talking about your first car with Lotus, 1976, the Type 77, like the one here, or this is your winning car from from that year, 1976. The infinitely adjustable suspension idea that we were talking about. I understand this car has 108 independent settings just for the rear wing on its own. And that maybe brought in the flex, which maybe gave the vague handling that you described with this car. Is it true that you wanted to get the 78 introduced mid-season this year? Was it Zandvoort, I think, to introduce it, and that was sort of vetoed because they wanted to keep the wing car idea secret?
Well, I think there was something like that, of course. I mean, there was a strategic play for them. I think it was that we were too advanced already in the season to let this come out. He wanted to, to create more of a surprise because Colin just wanted to revolutionize something, and something that would catch potentially everyone by surprise, sort of, like I said, because in those days especially, it was all about everybody, just to see what everybody else was doing. It was a copy thing, and can you imagine all the technical exchange that were going on at the local pub, after the day's work, between the mechanics and everything else. That was going on everywhere, and all the disciplines, if you will. There was a joke about Indianapolis. I said more technical information is exchanged after 6 o'clock at night, between 6 and 10, in the local bars than you could ever imagine. All the mechanics, they're all talking about one another. And it was always, I used to tell my chief, I said, make sure you go out there and see what's going on in the rest of our world and see what we can learn. But again, that was a game, but Colin wanted to protect that, and what you're saying. And he wanted to be, as you said, he wanted to make that car look like a London bus vis-a-vis the Lotus 77 vis-a-vis the 78. He wanted to make it look like, so totally different.
So is it true also that is it at Zandvoort the next year with the 78, the Type 78, that you'd set, was it a 1.5 second pole over John Watson? It was quite upset about that because you were sort of demonstrating the superiority of the car. Is that true?
It's funny you would say that because I think it was at Zeltwijk.
Right.
It was in Belgium.
Right.
In Belgium. I couldn't help it. Actually it gave me a bit of a bollocking, but I said I never had a bollocking for going too quick. And they said, you can't show your car. I said, Colin, I said, this thing is feeling too good. I said, so we got to do it. So as a driver, it's, it was a dream for me to be able to feel. You feel like, you're controlling something that you always, that's almost impossible to control, if you will. So please enjoy the moment, type of thing,
So with the 78 in 1977, and so I understand that you had quite a lot of issues with the engine, let's say reliability problems, sort of costing the championship, even though arguably the most superior car. Then we get to the 79 the next year, not introduced straight away, I understand. You'd won the first race in the old 78 in the 1978 season, and then there's a couple more races, and then by round 6, this car is ready. Was that as much of a step up from the previous car as the 78 had been over the 77?
Well, it's interesting that like you say that because here we are in Belgium again, and Ronnie had just tested the 79 in Understorp in Sweden, and I didn't have much information on how the car went, just a test car, and somehow they were sheepish about it, if you will. And but you know, I always had that relationship with the mechanics that were, yeah, they would tell me everything. And so I said, Colin, I said, I would like to race a test car. He said, no, no, Mario, it's not ready. It's not race ready. It's impossible. I think, you know, there are many things that were not tested. And so I talked to the vicar, you know who I'm talking about. And I said, do you think you could make this, the 79, the test car race ready? If that's what you want, Mario, we will do that. And I said, Colin, I insist. And that's when I first raced that car, and we won.
Right.
And yeah, and that was my insistence, you know. But going back to your question, yes, I mean, it was a definite improvement, you know, because on the rear diffuser, they cleaned up the exits, you know, they did a lot of things that they learned. And because the 79 had much more proper wind tunnel testing information. It was just cleaned up. Aerodynamically, you can put the two cars, you know, next to each other, and you can see huge, you know, improvement in a 79. And as you said, in 78 and 79 also, 79, fortunately, you know, we won the championship, but in 78, probably would have won an easier championship than 79.
Right. Okay.
I'm telling you, I mean, we ran out of fuel twice leading. And one South Africa, last lap, leading in Understorp. That was not anyone's fault, except that the mixture meter went to full rich somehow, you know, during the race, and you know, the clicking, and I knew the way that the engine was responding. Sometimes you do that in the wet, you know, so you don't have this jolt, you know, in response to the engine, so it stumbles a bit, which is good. It's almost like traction control, and I was experiencing that, so I figured, oh no, you know, and I know a marginal Colin was, you know, with a fuel load, you know, he wanted to finish every race with about a liter, no more than a liter of fuel, and I kept thinking, I kept pointing in my head, and I drove so hard, you know, to put my distance, you know, between, I think, I forget who was running second at the time. Anyway, I know that I was like 36 seconds in the lead. And when the fuel pressure started, you know, oscillating, I went in the pits, and they were not ready for me. They had to look for fuel. And by the time, you know, I went out, and I classified sixth. But even finishing second would have been a world championship there. You know, another one, you know, and the other one that was a heartbreaker for me, this is again in 77, was in Canada. You know, in Canada, with about 3 laps to go, I had more than a lap lead on Jody Scheckter. And there was oil pressure fluctuating. And because I was consuming oil, I think Cosworth was experimenting, I think, with just one ring, you know, the piston ring. I don't understand, you know. So I was actually consuming oil, and I ran out of oil. And on the last lap, on the straightaway that was named after me, the Andretti, the last lap, just toward the end of the straightaway, the engine blew up.
Oh, heartbreaking.
And I knew there was oil. I zigzagged all over the place, hoping that, you know, the next car coming, you know, would slide off or something. You know, so. and of course, I stopped short of the start-finish line. I was classified, I forget where, but and that one, I mean, that was in our pocket, you know. But you see what I mean? The heartbreakers that we had, and you know, and then you know, we finished a close third in the championship, but you know, but the closest margin in points as well. And so again, but you know, the reliability, engine reliability, unfortunately, was not on our side.
Hmm.
And cars they were trying to do us a favor to some degree, to do some experimenting. We did not need. I needed the reliability. That's
Hmm.
what I needed, and we suffered quite a bit from that for sure. There was engines, unfortunately.
Yeah, causing issues. Because I suppose you got the 78 into the next year. There's a few reliability issues, I think, as well. You had in a couple of the races before the 79 comes in. So 2 wins with the 78. Round 6, 79 comes in, as you said earlier, pole by over a second, I understand, and then relatively easy win in the first race, like you said. And then from that point on, was it like plain sailing with this car versus the previous season?
Well, yeah, in so many ways, yes, indeed. Yeah, it was, but I think ultimately, I think we might have had versus the competition, maybe more of an advantage in 77 than in 78,
Right.
because I think the rest of the field sort of caught up in so many ways. I think it was Williams that had the first sort of similar type of ground effect in 78. I'm not all sure, but they all were. There were a couple of designers that were caught, taking photos, and pulled out from underneath our cars and things like that.
I've heard these stories.
Yeah, there was a lot of curiosity as to what's happening underneath these cars and all that, and of course Ferrari was always strong and they were reliable too.
Mm.
That's what was winning it for them. But to be in the play and to be the ones to beat, that's the thing that you dream about in
Yeah.
this game. Yeah.
So the first thing I was saying about the 78, that's actually my personal favorite Lotus Formula One car. I think because it's just that midway stage between what came before and then
I love
and this.
love
Yeah.
love that car actually
Yeah.
because I knew what it was giving me, and yeah, I agree with you in that respect. Yes.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear you say about the fact that you probably had a bigger advantage with the previous season than the one we all know about with
Yeah,
that car. Um,
indeed.
and my favorite's just when I'm talking to people here about this car, you can see just there, all the decals on the rear wing there. That's just, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, all the first place finishes that you get from the point this car is introduced in 1978 till the end of the season. I think I'm right in saying, except for the last race at Canada, when you and John Watson had a bit of a coming together, you either crossed the line in first place or the car didn't finish the race.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So in terms of that car and its dominance, just from that point on, so many race wins.
Yeah. Again, this, every time when I see that car, I mean, that's my girl. you know.
So was it the 79 that you said was the one that you felt like it was speaking to you when you were driving it?
Oh, indeed. Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah, because those are the ones that have become more popular with with the individuals that have been collecting those, and all that. That's the real prize collected car.
Mm.
And Zach Brown, McLaren, he just loves that car, and that's the latest opportunity that I had to drive. The biggest thing is that everybody that drives those things, they're much fatter than me, and then I would have to, get proper fitting in the car.
So you've still got that one thing that you can drive it better than anyone else. You fit inside better, I guess.
I think I think so.
Brilliant. When you were saying about the 79, one thing that we talk about like the technical advancements of the car and the ground effects being so good, and like you said, cleaning up the aerodynamics out the back to get that 30% more downforce for this car than the previous car. One thing that I really like that I've read about, and that I could read it to you now because it's something Colin Chapman was saying, was about the car not being the thing that got the world championship. He says very clearly that it's fundamentally you as a member of the team and as the driver fundamental to getting that world championship. And he says, like, just reading it here, a lot of people have suggested it was the car's superiority which allowed Mary to take the title. It's a view which I do not share. I don't think Team Lotus would have been anything as competitive. Of that, I'm quite certain. Mario Andretti's personal contribution to the competitive of the 79 was immense, and without him, basically says we wouldn't have won the World Championship. So is it nice to think that Colin Chapman saying that about yourself driving the car?
Well, that's a wonderful compliment, of course, but it quite honestly, you talk about a teamwork. I mean, this was what Colin gave me this incredible amount of confidence, but also I was interested in not only the aerodynamics, but also the suspension dynamics and all the other things that go with it. And the one thing that I think I understood pretty well as a driver is the balancing between the compromise, because it's all about, so you downforce, okay, downforce, but then you that's good for the high speed corners and that, but what do you do in a hairpin? Because if the car has, you heard about the porpoising and all that sort of thing. Well, that means you have more downforce of what suspension can deal with. So what do you have to do? You have to stiffen the car, but there's got to be a compromise. And that's the area where I was able to really relate to Colin about, just, the spring rate and all that sort of thing. And we were I was very finicky about that. And that's where we really worked close. And some of the thing I couldn't even explain. And I felt that because of that's a lot of that came from testing too. I had a certain feel about the mechanical side, and I was making even minute changes. They said, "What are you doing that for?" I said, "I can hardly explain it. Let's just do it." And I used to play a little bit, before the radial tires, with tire pressures to change the circumference of the rear tires. I used to run some stagger, but then compensate on a stagger on a spring load. So the car, where you put the car with the bigger left rear on the scales, it still was square as far as, otherwise, if you didn't compensate on the springs, it would have crossweight, which you don't want, And so I used to do a lot of little tricks like that. And Colin, I think he was a little bit fascinated about it, Then I used to play it also a little bit with steering. And that's another little trick that sometimes was between pole or not pole, that would give me, those cars were so delicate at that point and responsive. And I think Colin used to, used to be sometimes fascinated as to the little tweaks that we used to do. All of a sudden, we get results. And it was really a wonderful combination between he understood what I was saying in so many ways. But then the other part that I think was beneficial to me, that, Colin, he always, brilliant man, he had ideas. He was throwing so many things at me that sometimes I figure, what the hell, where's he coming from? Then I think, he's keeping my mind fertile, so I'm thinking further, and I say, oh yeah, let's try that. And all of these things, were playing, but I don't think it could have happened without Colin, quite honestly, because I think we both had so much confidence in one another. Me and him and me. And there's no better way to get things done like that. So it was always, I said, what? We felt that we were like improving every time I was in the car. We were learning something new, something that was never stale. The situation was never stale, and so it was really a fantastic time.
Yeah, it's so nice as well to hear, isn't it, when you say about that personality link and the working together being the key thing. I know one of the things that I've heard a lot of people say still, and that is in things like the books that I read, is about your contribution to the team and the teamwork within the team as well. I think it's Colin Chapman who said that the morale within the team was its highest that it had been, I think, since the days of Jimmy Clark when you were driving with the team, as a personal compliment to you. And was it really that really gelling, brilliant teamwork that also led to the success of this car?
Oh, you have no idea the relationship that we formed, with the mechanics, with everyone. I speak to them. I was twice. I was talking with Beaky, Dave Sims, yesterday. You know, we always, you know, we keep this relationship, and we've continued. We have lifetime friendship, you know, from this. You know, how many years? You know, all growing old together, you know, and still reminiscing and feeling good about the times that we spent together. So to me, it was always, and throughout my career, I felt that's my family. They're the ones that make it all happen. And again, it went both ways, but the relationship that we formed, you know, especially from a time when I joined at, you know, Lotus, they were not happy. There was no happiness. And then we figured we turned it around together, you know, and we all did it together. I mean, this is pure teamwork. You know, everybody did their job, and because of that, like I said, the human side really comes together. You know, we have a certain appreciation. Anytime, I mean, these guys, if we needed to swing an engine, you know, 2 hours before the race, they would do that. There was never a question. You know, they do whatever, you know, was necessary to do to try to accomplish what, you know, our objective. So yeah, I mean, that relationship is precious for me, no question. Like I said, we all growing old together, and appreciate one another and bringing back good times, quite honestly.
In your book, there's a nice quote that I like when you say about driving for Colin Chapman, you felt a responsibility to win for Colin Chapman. You didn't want to be that person who joined Lotus and didn't get a world championship. And there's a really nice quote that I found in Peter War's book. He says, basically, it was one of the proudest moments of Team Lotus to be able to say that they contributed in some way to Mario Andretti getting the title of world champion, to add that to all the other championships he so richly deserved. And it's this kind of idea that the team wanted to give you the championship as opposed to the driver winning it for the team. I just thought that was a really nice summary.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I don't deserve that. Those accolades, of course. No, we all contributed equally, you know, and there's no question about it. Any element missing would have been missing, you know, but all the elements came together. Everybody shares this together, you know, equally.
Yeah, that's lovely. So we get to the World Championship. You've achieved that dream that you said you'd set out way from back in Italy all those years ago. You're now the world champion in Formula One. Can you talk us through a little bit about after that point with Lotus? Because you have a few more seasons with Lotus. Obviously, you said earlier about the porpoising, and we know that the Type 80, which is sat right in front of me actually, the following car to the Type 79, suffered from those issues. And then you went back to racing the previous season's car. What was the story behind those later cars?
Well, I think the Lotus 80 was a definite improvement aerodynamically, but mechanically, it just needed, to me, I described this to Colin, and he didn't like to hear that. I says that the Lotus 80 is like a beautiful lady, you know, dressed, you know, famously and gorgeously. I said, but had cancer. And the cancer was the chassis was actually, for the amount of downforce we were receiving and stiff we needed to have, you know, the spring rates and so forth, the chassis was, you know, doing some crazy thing, needed some torsional stiffnesses.
Right,
And
okay.
he resisted that because of the weight factor, you know. So we gained a lot on the aerodynamic side, but we did not follow along with the torsional stiffness, and that's where some of the competition did that. I loved the 80. I loved it, you know, testing, but as soon as you started jumping the curbing, which always was my style, I tried to get the most, you know, out of the corner and so forth. Then I would come in the next corner, the car would not repeat. I could feel that the car would gain, and I proved that actually. You know, after taking all the body, anyway, it's a long story how I did it, but I proved that the thing was torsional, And that's when Colin and I started sort of not agreeing with each other, because I kept pointing that out to him. I said, Colin, the car changes dramatically. I remember, we had a podium finish in Jarama, I think it was in Spain. Yeah, in Spain. And I was following Carlos Reutemann. He was, with the 79, I had the 80. And I knew I had some advantage, some areas, but then once I really started driving hard, all of a sudden the car just disappeared on me, changed dramatically. And I said, the car is changing throughout the race. And we were popping rivets all over the place. I said, that's what it is. I said that this needs some redesign in that respect. And Colin didn't really want to hear that so much, but he didn't want to add weight. That's what it was.
Right.
Part of it, I suppose. It's a shame that, the car was definitely progression, no question. But most of it was really concentrated on the aerodynamic side, which paid off. But the mechanical side needed to be revamped as well, in my point of view. Maybe the engineers disagree, but I knew what I was feeling. It was not the right thing. I wish I could have continued with a car if they would have gone along and tried to really try to adjust that side of it, so we could eliminate that. The car was becoming almost undrivable.
Right.
I just jumping the curb and I said, I don't recognize the car anymore. So that was unfortunate.
Okay. And then after that car, so when we get into the Type 81, I think your last season with Lotus. And what's the story with the last season that you were with us?
Well, I think that at that point, I think Colin started thinking way ahead. He was thinking of the new design, with the way, you know what I'm talking about. The design that actually was outside of the rules, if you will. But he thought that he thought that he could get a pass by, because he was right at the fringe, in the gray area of the rules, if you will, about unsprung weight type of thing. And he was thinking way ahead. He lost interest in the present situation. That's what I felt to some degree. And that's what somehow things got just the same relationship wasn't there, with us. We started thinking differently, when I was talking with him, his mind, I think, was way ahead of what I was doing. He was bored with what we had, if you will. He said, we accomplished everything we wanted to do. Now he was already thinking of something. I think, maybe
Right.
not, but we had that. But yeah.
Okay. And your last sort of few forays into Formula One then in the next couple of years?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I went with my heart, I figured I'd go with Alfa Romeo, It seemed like they were very competitive, like with Giacomelli dominating the last race of the season in 1980. And so I had a choice to go with a McLaren because of the Marlboro sponsorship, or Alfa Romeo. And I chose Alfa Romeo, which was, I think, in retrospect, the wrong choice, no question. But there was the big rule change for 1981 was, you had to clear, right height, exiting the pits and entering the pits. They were raising the car to eliminate some of the downforce. And then the hydraulic system came into play, which was a cheater. And when the first race, in Argentina, Nelson Piquet, I think he lapped the field. They had, with Bernie on the Brabham. a car. They had this system, where they could jack the car up as soon as it passed the pits, because you had to clear a box,
Right.
certified. And after that race, everybody else copied it. Alfa Romeo, they said, "Oh no, it's outside the rules," And Carlo Kitty said, well, "I could not embarrass Alfa Romeo, if we protested, they were cheaters." I said, "Everybody else is cheating," and it was a struggling season, and that's why then I decided, I said, maybe it's time to just go back and finish my career in IndyCar.
Yeah.
That's really come down to.
Okay, and I suppose by that point, like you said, you'd achieved your childhood dream. You'd won the world championship in also, in such a dramatic fashion in this car. Obviously, the sad thing that we haven't spoken about with that year is the crash at Italy. And just as a Lotus fan, I'd just like to ask you about Ronnie. What was he like as a teammate?
Oh, Ronnie and I were very good friends, no question. I mean, we were competitors. It's like anything else. I mean, I had a lot of friends, where when we were on the racetrack, we tried to kill each other, and then we have a beer later on. It's just with the answers and so forth. And he was a great talent. Ronnie, we were good friends. The families were, the wives bonded together. The kids were about the same age, and outside of the track, we spent a lot of time together. When we come to the States, we go out. We have a place up in I have a lake on the Pogo with all the toys, and we just kill each other up there, in every way, and have fun, competitive in every way, from the tennis court to the water skiing and so forth. So,
yeah,
I mean, it was a wonderful time with the man. It was like me. It was like losing a brother, in that respect. And as I told you earlier, that's the only reason we did not protest that race, because I won that race. I reacted at the start. I reacted, but I didn't go. And Gilles, he took off. And he was almost to the chicane by the time we went. And I had brake problems. That's another thing that we didn't talk about in the Lotus 79. Actually, I need to touch on that. And it took me the whole race to decide where I'm going to take a do or die past going and happen to the Ascari curve, and because I couldn't abuse the brakes, and I'll tell you why. And so I passed them going to the Ascari curve on the last lap, and I won the race. But then we were both, given a minute penalty and so forth, But anyway, and that's the other thing. But I got to touch on that. That's one thing that's very important about the 79 versus 78.
Okay.
And that is, the key factor there to make the flow of the air underneath more efficient. The rear, both cars had inboard brakes in the rear. And of course, at Lotus 78, they stuck out quite a bit because there was no reason, to do anything different. But with the diffusers, it was dirty air. The calipers and the disc created some, were actually interfering with the flow. So anyway, in the Lotus 79, to be able to make that part more efficient, Colin decided to keep the inboard brakes in the rear, but make it closer to the gearbox. And it had the Hewland design that half of the brake calipers would be part of the gearbox.
Okay.
So everything was, but never thinking that it was going to be a heat transfer from the gearbox to the brakes. So we were boiling the rear fluid, in almost every race. In fact, the first race, when I won in Belgium, I said, Colin, I had to pump the brakes on everyone going to the chicane and so on and so forth. And never, somehow that was going, it didn't sink in. But we had that issue throughout the year. And luckily, you know, we had some advantage, but they, you know, because as soon as you come in, I said, hardly even Ronnie, you know, said, we have no brakes. And you go in there as soon as it cools down a little bit. Oh yeah, this pedal. What's the matter with you guys? You know, you just you see what I mean. That was the only weakness that we had in the '79 that we never really addressed properly, and that was because of that design factor, which gained on the aerodynamic, but the brakes were not the forte of that car. I think the big issue was the heat from the gearbox was boiling the fluid in the rear brakes. And that's a fact. That's a fact. And when you're really fighting hard, you know, especially Watkins going south, I said, oh no. I had the Ferrari beat so badly, no problem, but they had the brakes. And that's what especially, you know, at the beginning of the race with full load of fuel. It was, oh man. And then you had to pump the brakes before a break, and so obviously you couldn't brake too late. And yeah, that was definitely a part that was, you know, was a problem during the race.
Okay.
Now qualifying, no issue, obviously. You know.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear. So even with the car that we now retrospectively think of as like so dominant, that was so successful. Obviously, that you've still, as a driver, have got all these things that you have to try and manage, even with the car that we know is as successful as that. So that's really interesting to hear.
Yeah, it was. I mean, if we had brakes, and that would have been, you know, a lot more comfortable in the race. In fact, and if you were really pressed hard, that was the other thing when Ronnie was behind me, even was I think Paul Riccardi was right on me. The wind, the Mistral, they call it Mistral. The wind, they had a tailwind in the race, and I was going a red limiter at the end of the straight, and they had changed gear. They changed gear on his. They didn't change. I didn't change gear on mine, and he was really catching me up. And but then he was catching me up in many areas. He was using his brakes quite a bit, and I sort of knew it. And I said, that's my defense, you know, because then I knew what he was experiencing, and that's how I was defending myself. And he said, you know, I can't repeat it in the air, but he was bullocking. So that's the play that we had between them. Nobody knew that, you know. But
just the two of you.
Yeah, we knew what we were up against.
Oh,
But
okay. Yeah.
he would have loved to just go out and pass me, you know, and then maybe whatever, but let me go or something, you know, to show that he could. But there was another instance at Brands Hatch.
Right.
Brands Hatch, you know, I really miscalculated the rear springs and so forth. And so he put the car on pole vis-a-vis me. And and he chose the clean part of the circuit, you know, for the start. But when I came in, I don't know if you can see that, I came in and I pointed, because you know, a dirty part, and I knew I had a lot of wheel spin. I pointed toward him like this, and when the flag dropped, I went like this, and I went right into. And I didn't get penalized, but I had the car like this, you know, going. I went like this, and I. And so anyway, it was just that kind of thing, and we used to discuss it later. And there were a few F-bombs flowing, you know.
Well, I suppose heat competition, once you're a racer, I suppose you're always racing. So
yeah,
yeah.
There was definitely competition between us, I can tell you that.
Oh, brilliant. Well, just looking at, so I've been keeping you talking for well over an hour. I mean, I could sit and listen to you talk all day. But I've got to wrap the interview up at some point. So just as like a final thing, in terms of driving for Lotus, like you said about Colin Chapman as a driving force and the nature of the team and this idea, I suppose, which I think you kind of alluded to, that a really sort of open suggestion sort of policy and like sort of everyone pitching in with ideas and coming up with new solutions at Lotus. That's sort of unfair as what overall sort of idea of the team at the time?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's the experience, the camaraderie, everything that I had with Lotus never happened anywhere in my career, quite
Right. Okay.
honestly. Mainly because there was so many moving parts, so many things happening and going in the right direction too. But there was, we had to really, really all work together. You know what I mean, to make it all happen. Like I said, we were going to unfamiliar ground. I mean, we created, with the ground effect, we created a new direction in aerodynamics. There was no one ever thought about it, but it didn't start out as ground, but it turned out to be. And it's something that we were cultivating, if you will, together. One thing after another, we were gaining information on ourselves. And this was so much fun because of that, because, you're always looking for that little bit of an advantage you can gain somewhere. And there was a period there that there was an unequal in my career, no question. And like I said, going back when I reflect on it, I said, how blessed I was to have had that opportunity with the great talents like that, and then come together and you could see that the camaraderie stayed with us. We all enjoyed the same period together, benefited from it, from a career standpoint. So I look back with incredible fondness, with my relationship that I had with Lotus and the family.
Well, I mean, that's the thing that I still hear even today when I'm working over here. That's the sense that I still get from talking to people as I do in the job that I do. So I know that's very much a reciprocated feeling. So that's really nice. Do you think the time that you were racing in Formula One, do you think this was the most exciting era in Formula One racing?
For me, it was.
Yeah.
You have to be in my shoes to really realize how awesome, how wonderful that was. Yeah,
Yeah.
no question. But when you look back, though, I mean, you talk about performance advancement and so forth. It's hard to come by with anything that would be better than the ground effects situation, because we learned to actually some of the reasoning that went on, while we were, just throwing ideas around at the end of 1976, the end of 76. And one of the questions from the engineer from Colin to me says, what are your ideas as a driver? I said, well, as a driver, I like to have downforce without drag penalty. Free downforce.
Free downforce.
Free downforce without drag is ground effects, because there's no drag penalty there. And that's what it is. The surface wings are only for balance. Yeah, of course, you have more rear wing, whatever, at the same time. But still, but for total downforce, it's the ground effect, and then it's all about getting where the center of pressure should be, playing with that, which it's like the height of the diffusers where you want it, there's a lot to play with. It was interesting that when they reintroduced downforce in Formula One, how some of the teams were experiencing the purposing. Well, I was very familiar with that part. And I have a pretty good idea how we cured it too, but it's amazing.
Still the same problems all these years later, I suppose.
Same problems happening to new people.
Oh, well, I'll just say, Mary, it's been such a pleasure for me to talk to you today. I've really, really enjoyed the conversation. As you could probably tell, like I said, I could sit and listen to you all afternoon. I'm sure you've got other things to be going and doing. Well, I suppose one final thing, really, is just what's next? What's next for you in at this stage in your life? You're sitting back. You've got the picture on the wall. You're wearing a. Thank you very much as well for wearing the jacket to show that you are, Team Lotus world champion. What
Have
comes
to
next?
go on more of an extensive diet, be able to button it up totally. But no, I mean, for me, my passion continues, to be close to the sport, obviously, with family involved, Michael, his ambitions, to be at the top level, and all the different disciplines. That's something I'm very proud for him, and gives me reason to stay close and be part of it. That will be for the rest of my life, no question. That's the only life that I really enjoy, you know, and that's it. That's it. It's still motor racing until the end.